Tonight's story is about a little boy who climbed up a tree and fell out.
Why?
Well, little boys shouldn't climb trees, really, but that's what boys do sometimes.
Why?
Because they don't listen to their daddies and mummies. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who lived with his mummy and daddy. He had a very large garden with lots of trees in it. Mummy and daddy said to him, "Don't climb the trees, you might fall out and hurt yourself." Well, when his mummy and daddy were watching, he was very careful to follow their instructions, because if they saw him trying to climb a tree, they'd get very cross and tell him off. But one day, his mummy and daddy had gone out shopping and left him alone in the house and the garden. He thought, "Aha, my mummy and daddy aren't there. I can climb the trees now and nobody will know." So he started to climb a tree. It was quite an easy tree to climb, with lots of branches which were very low down, which made it easy to get up higher and higher. As he climbed, he became a little bit scared, but he still wanted to get to the top, because he wanted to see what he could see from the top of a tree. So he kept climbing. Some of the branches didn't seem very strong, so he tested them before he climbed on them just to make sure, and they seemed to hold his weight, but only just. Up and up he went, when suddenly, crack! One of the branches he was standing on broke. He tumbled down, hitting branches on the way down. Unfortunately for him, one of the branches snapped the bone in his arm. He landed at the bottom with a broken arm. He was in such pain, he couldn't stand up. So he shouted for his mommy and daddy, but as you know, they'd gone shopping, so nobody heard him, and he lay there crying. Eventually, his mummy and daddy came back and didn't see him around, so they went into the garden to look for him and saw him lying on the ground with his broken arm. "Oh dear," said Mummy and Daddy, "what's happened to you?" "I've broken my arm," said the little boy. "No," said the Mummy. "How did that happen?" "I was running in the garden, I fell over," lied the boy. His mother knew he was lying, because she can always tell when he's lying. But on the other hand, she wasn't going to be cross with him for lying, because she was more worried about his arm and she wanted to get it mended. So she called an ambulance, and the ambulance came to the house like this, very fast. Da-doo, da-doo, da-doo. All the cars getting out of the way in the road. Every car on the road had to get out of the way of the ambulance. Da-doo, da-doo, da-doo. And then the ambulance arrived at his house, and the doctors ran into the garden carrying a stretcher. They checked the little boy, checked all his bones, but could clearly see that his arm was broken. "Oh dear, dear, dear," they said. "We'll give you a little injection for the pain so it doesn't hurt," which the boy was very grateful for, because it was very painful. And then they put the arm into a splint. A splint is like a piece of wood which will hold it in place so it won't wiggle around until they get to the hospital. So they took him back to the hospital. Now the little boy was in the ambulance. He could hear the siren going, da-doo, 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 da-doo. He seemed to drift off to sleep. Eventually, he suddenly noticed they were picking him up. He must have arrived at the hospital, and they were carrying him through the hospital wards and put him in a bed in the hospital. Then, after lying there for 10 minutes or more, a doctor came to see him. "Hello," said the doctor. "What happened to you?" "I fell down. I was running." Now, the doctor's no fool, and he knows you don't break an arm when you fall over if you are running. So the doctor looked carefully at the boy's arm and noticed that there were some brown scrape marks which had come obviously from a tree, not from the grass. Said the doctor. Well, if you had fallen out of a tree, I could do something and make your arm better. But since you fell over just running, there's nothing I can do. Oh, well, actually, I did fall out of a tree, said the little boy, confessing the truth now. Aha, said the doctor, who knew all along that the little boy had been lying. I knew as much. Okay, come on, let's get your arm fixed. So the first thing they did, they took the little boy to the X-ray room and put him on a special table, which went through a big X-ray machine, and then inside the machine they X-rayed his arm. It didn't take long for the doctor to have the image of his arm, and he came in to show the boy, and yes, indeed, it looked like a broken branch, except it's a broken bone. Yes, it's not too serious, said the doctor. I think I can put it together. So what we're going to do is put you to sleep so you don't feel anything. You'll have a mask over your face and you'll have to breathe in, and the gas will make you sleep. And when you're asleep, I'll put the bone back the way it's supposed to be. Then, to make sure it doesn't come out of place, we're going to have to put a castoplast on your arm to hold it in place. The doctor then put the mask over the little boy and asked him to count to 10. So the little boy said 1, 2, 3, and he was asleep already before he got to 4. Much, much later, the little boy started to open his eyes. He felt a bit woozy, still very sleepy. He looked around and he could see he was in the recovery ward of the hospital. A nurse came in and said, "Hello, how are you feeling?" Where am I?" said the little boy. "You're in the recovery ward of the hospital. The doctor's fixed your arm." And the little boy looked at his arm, and it was covered in a white castoplast, really solid. "Is that a castoplast?" he said. "Yes," said the nurse. "Doctors put it on. You won't be able to bend your arm for a long time now. In a month or two, you can take it off, but for the moment, you're going to have to wear that, and you won't be able to have a bath. If you want to wash yourself, you have to wash yourself with a flannel." Well, the nurse then said, "Your mummy's here, you can go back home now." So the mummy helped the little boy get in the car, strapped his safety belt in, and drove him home. When he got home, the little boy wanted to play with his toys. But suddenly he noticed he'd only got one arm that he could use, because the other arm was in a castoplast and he could barely move it. It was very difficult to play with his toys with just one arm, so he decided to read a book. But you usually need one arm to hold the book and the other one to turn the pages. That was very difficult. And then it was time to eat his dinner, and he was quite hungry. His mama sat him down at the table, and in front of him was a knife and fork, but one of his arms was in the plaster cast. He couldn't move it. He could only pick up his fork. And really, there were things on his plate, like potatoes, which needed to be cut. It was very difficult with only one arm you could use. The next day, he went to the creche, and all the children looked at his arm. Everybody was very fascinated by his arm in the plaster cast. Nobody had ever seen one of those before. "How did you do it?" said one of the boys. Well, don't tell my mummy, but I was climbing a tree in my garden and I fell out." "Climbing a tree? You know you're not allowed to do that," said the boy. And then a girl chimed in, "Yes, I never climb a tree." Soon the whole class knew that he'd been climbing trees when he wasn't allowed to, and the whole class knew that he'd fallen out of the tree and broken his arm. One of the children came up to the little boy and said, "Can I draw a picture on your plaster cast?" The little boy thought it was a good idea. And it wasn't long before all the children were drawing pictures on his plaster cast. He had pictures of animals, pictures of people, pictures of houses, stars. Well, anything you can imagine was drawn. It was all different colours and covered with pictures drawn by all the children in the creche. When his mummy came in to get him at the creche, she was very surprised to see all those pictures on his plaster cast. But she didn't mind, because it showed he'd had a lot of fun that day. And she wasn't cross with him. Do you think she should be cross with him? No. Even though she knew that he'd climbed a tree, she wasn't cross with him. She was more concerned about getting his arm fixed. So the months went by, weeks went by, I suppose not months. The weeks went by with the boy only able to use one hand. But little by little he became more and more used to doing it, and he could manage things, until one day it was time to go back to the hospital to have the plaster cast removed. So went into the hospital, and the doctor had a very large pair of powerful scissors. He put one end under the plaster cast next to the boy's skin, but not touching his skin in a bad way, and started to cut the plaster cast off. When it was off, the doctor felt the arm with his fingers. He said, "Seems all right. Looks like the bone is taken. But just to be sure, we're going to do another x-ray." So the little boy was wheeled into the x-ray room and sat in front of a screen while they x-rayed his arm. Again, it was very quick to see the result on the screen. The doctor looked at it and said, "Yes, I see what's happened. Your arm is fully repaired. It's almost as good as new. Be careful with it for a few more weeks, but it's fine. Just don't go climbing any trees, please." "Oh, I'd never do that," said the little boy.
Daddy, did you know I climbed a tree yesterday? I was building a house, but Mommy helped me get up the tree. But actually, I feel, but I didn't like, so I pushed it down. But actually, I get out. So I did a tree again.
Mummy helped you climb a tree yesterday?
Yes.
I didn't know. But I expect she was there to catch you.
But I was building a house, but I was there building a house where I was cutting the grass was outside. It was there there, but then Mommy, I just had to climb a tree, but I could. So Mommy helped me to climb a tree.
Did she now?
Yeah.
Well. I didn't know Mummy had let you climb trees. That's very scary. How high did you go? Probably not higher than Mummy, I'm sure.
I didn't go way high. No, I didn't. I didn't really get way high because it was really scary. So then I get down.
So we'll just finish the story. We're nearly at the end. Remember, the little boy had had his second x-ray after they cut off the plaster, and the doctor looked at it and said, "Yep, that's just fine. Don't go climbing any trees again." And the boy went home with his mummy, and she gave him a nice dinner, and he was so happy he could use his both hands to eat, one hand for his fork, the other hand for his knife. Now he was like normal again, and he could play with his toys, and he could read books, and he could do all the things he could do before. It had been very difficult for 1 month with only one hand. And when he went back to the creche, everybody asked what had happened to his plaster cast. So he told them, "I had it cut off, but the doctor gave it to me to keep for old time's sake. I've got a copy of my plaster cast, or not the copy, the original of my cast plaster, in my bedroom, which was true, he had. And then the little boy was very good about trees in the future. He didn't climb trees anymore because he knew he might fall out and he didn't want to fall out again. So he only did safe things and only what his mummy and daddy told him he was allowed to do in the future. The end. And it's good night time now for you, Aidan.
I was not so bad at flying saucer.
Oh, I don't think. Let me see. Well, we could tell a story about flying saucer landing in the night garden. How about that?
Yes.
Okay. In the night garden, once upon a time, there was a flying saucer landed in the night garden. Well, the first person to see it was Eagle Piggle. Then Upsy Daisy arrived. They both examined it very closely. They walked around it, looked at it closely. "What is it, Eagle Piggle?" said Upsy Daisy. "I don't know," said Eagle Piggle. "It looks like a saucer, and I saw it flying." "Oh," said Upsy Daisy, "then maybe it's a flying saucer." Eagle Piggle was most intrigued. He'd never seen a flying saucer before, but he did know that maybe inside the flying saucer there would be some kind of aliens. Macca arrived. Macca asked Eagle Piggle and Upsy Daisy.
And three Macca came?
Yes, sorry, is it 3 Macca?
Yes.
No, that's the Tomliboos, the 3 Tomliboos, you mean? There's only 1 Macca.
Yes. And 3 Tomliboos.
So the Tomliboos came as well, and the Pontypines came. Everyone came to see the flying saucer.
And the Nathan and the Pinky Kong.
I guess the Pinky Ponk came to see it too.
And the Nathan Long.
Why not the Ninky Nonk seeing it too? Yes, I guess so. Anyway, everybody who lives in the night garden came to see the flying saucer. Then the door opened and everybody peered inside to see what would come out. Well, what actually came out were aliens which looked like me and Mummy. So they came up to the Pinky Ponk and said, "Are you a flying saucer too?" But the Pinky Ponk went oink oink, or whatever the noise it makes, boink oink, because it can't talk. So they soon realized that the Pinky Ponk wasn't that intelligent. But then they went to Upsy Daisy and they said to Upsy Daisy, "Are you a human being?" And Upsy Daisy said, "Yes, I am." And Eagle Piggle's a human being too. "What about that one?" they said, pointing at Macca. Well, Upsy Daisy didn't know if Macca was a human or not. And then there were the 3 Tomliboos. They shook hands with the aliens and they had a nice conversation and they told the aliens everything about the night garden. And the aliens were very happy to hear it. But now it was time for the aliens to get back in their spaceship, get back into their flying saucer and go and fly somewhere else. The end.